I don't know if you're familiar with the literary term antihero. It's something I wasn't necessarily very familiar with, probably most recently, probably within the past 6 months, I've been kind of introduced to the term and the meaning of the term, even though probably having read stories and viewed movies in which there were an anti-hero. So what's an anti-hero? An anti-hero is a literary term. It first appeared in the 1700s, early 1700s, and it was used to kind of talk about the guy who was against the hero in the story. But over 100 years into the 1850s, the word kind of morphed into the way that it is used today, and that is not somebody who is against the hero, but somebody who is an unlikely hero. They're unlikely because they lack the moral character, or maybe they're unlikely to be a hero because they're so self-focused, so into themselves. But as the story, whatever the story is, begins to develop, there's a sense in which this character, this anti-hero, in spite of his or her weaknesses and flaws, has something within them that in the moment of injustice, when they encounter injustice, something is sparked within them so that they act. And it's in their action that they maybe put their life at risk and step in the place of injustice and bring deliverance. They become this hero, thus, in a sense, redeeming their character because their character has been morally flawed. So that's an anti-hero. That's what the term means, and you definitely have encountered the anti-hero. So like a fairly modern, well, it's actually kind of modern when I was a kid, but it's definitely become a kind of a cool show over the past decade for sure. It's the Star Wars show, and you know, there's lots of Star Wars episodes and movies that have been produced, but you know, one of the key characters is this character. You're not introduced to him right away, but he's this young Anakin Skywalker, right? Who's this lovable, likable, good-natured little kid who, as the story progresses and he grows to a young adult, is wooed to the dark side, right? So Emperor Palpatine woos him to the dark side, and there's this change then that happens within Anakin Skywalker, and he becomes Darth Vader. And of course, we all know that Darth Vader, he's the very dark, scary, evil lord of the universe, right? The Star Wars universe, of course. This is all fiction, right? But then as the story continues to progress, it nears the end of Darth Vader's life, and he's having a fight with his son. His son doesn't know that Darth Vader's his dad, right? And at the end, he could kill his son, Luke, but he doesn't. Instead, there's this change that happens within him. And he becomes this hero then because of his action, which ends up harming the dark side, which he'd always, he had been transformed to become this dark lord of. But he spares his son Luke, who's on the good side. The force is with him. The good force is with him. So that's a picture of an anti-hero. Another one comes from Beauty and the Beast. The cute story, the Disney story of this handsome prince who is so self-focused, so self-interested that he can't see anybody else, can't love anybody else, and so he gets turned into this ugly beast. And in order... So the person who curses him says, look, you've got until this rose last petal falls to the ground to find somebody to love you. And so the beast eventually encounters this beautiful Princess Belle, right? And Belle is pursued by this evil Gaston, and the beast places himself in defense of Belle. He eventually falls off this building in this fight, protecting Belle, and on the ground he lies, but Belle comes and falls on him, and she shows his love and appreciation for him, right? And so this beast, in a moment of seeing injustice, defends Belle and is about to die, but Belle, her love for him stops this horrible curse, and then he turns into this wonderful prince. Right? And so, again, another image of anti-hero. And there's lots and lots of anti-heroes throughout stories. And these stories, they're not like original in terms of these ideas. Because as our series title tells us, it all gets started in Genesis, right? Genesis, it all starts here. All these themes, these ideas, there's so many things that get their root, get their start, and we are formed and taught of them in the book of Genesis. And so we started the series way back in January, and here we are in the middle of summer, and we've got another month and a half to go before we get to the end of this book. But in Genesis, we encounter, and today we're going to encounter an anti-hero. Now, here's the thing about the anti-hero. You and I, the anti-hero can be somebody that you and I connect with. We all may be anti-heroes. We certainly all fit the definition of being a person who is morally cockwampus, falls short, in biblical terms, is sinful, has gone our own way. There's nothing good within us, right? So that's the kind of the idea of the anti-hero. But in a moment of seeing injustice, the anti-hero is redeemed in that they step in and they do something. We're going to see that today, okay? And we all can resonate with this. You can be an anti-hero if you understand the concepts. So today we're looking at Genesis chapter 38. We'll be introduced to the anti-hero Tamar. So if you have a Bible, I invite you to turn there. And I'm just going to, today's just going to be like, I'm going to read some stuff, I'm going to say some stuff, I'm going to read some stuff, I'm going to say some stuff. It's going to be, most of the message is going to be like that. And at the end, we'll make 3 application points from this whole interesting story about this anti-hero. So Genesis 38 follows Genesis 37. It follows the story that we were introduced to last week. And the story that we were introduced to Joseph, right? And we said that the story of Joseph actually fits into the story of Jacob. And we'd been in the story of Jacob for many weeks. Genesis 37, verse 2, began by saying, this is the account of Joseph. This is the account of Jacob, and we raised the question, why is this the account of Jacob when the whole story is about Joseph? Well, Genesis 38, the next chapter, begins in a similar odd way. It says, at that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam. Now, I say it's odd because last week, this is the account of Jacob, and the whole story was about Joseph. And the story ended with Joseph being taken in captivity down to Egypt and then sold into slavery in Egypt. And then you flip your page, and at that time you bump into Judah left his brothers. So it kind of causes you as a reader to go, what happened to Joseph? Like, where is he? And why are we not talking about Judah? And how does Judah fit in this story? Right? And it creates these kinds of questions. And for those of you who have read the story, you know it's kind of a crazy story. But beyond it just being a crazy story, part of it is it just feels really odd. Genesis 38 feels odd, stuck in the middle of the story of Joseph. So what all is going on? Well, a couple things to kind of think through here. One of the things that's going on is we need to remember, we go back to Genesis, as I mentioned, 37, verse 2. This is the account of Jacob. Okay, this really is the story of Jacob. Jacob is the dad. He's the father of Joseph. Joseph is his firstborn son of his favorite wife, Rachel. It's the story of Jacob, who has a son, Joseph. He also has a lot of other sons. One of the other sons that he has is Judah. Now, this is the account of Jacob. So he has a son, Joseph, and he has a son, Judah. And so the writer tells us a little bit about this fourth-born son. Judah is a fourth-born son to the woman that he didn't really love, to Leah. It's Leah's fourth-born. Now, we were also introduced to Judah at nearing the end of chapter 37, because Judah was the character. He was the brother who said, oh, no, let's not kill our brother Joseph. Let's instead pull him out of the pit and sell him. Right? So this story fits in the context of what immediately happens after. They sell their brother Joseph, and then they go home to their dad, and they give him Joseph's torn up robe, and they leave their dad in this place of believing that his son has been killed. And so what happens immediately after that is this story of Judah. Now, why is it placed here is another question that we kind of struggle with. What's the point of it? Well, some of it is this. It creates a suspense about what's going on with Joseph. It makes us ask and wonder. It also creates this space between the event of Joseph being sold and what transpires next in Joseph's life, which is a whole lot of time. It's a number of years that transpires. And so that's helpful for us as a reader because we're left kind of wondering what happens to Joseph. And it's a helpful tool for the author, Moses, as he's telling the story. Remember, it's the story of Jacob. It's not the story of Joseph, and it's not the story of Judah, but it's the story of Jacob. And it gives us time for Joseph's character to develop, because pretty quickly we're going to be back to Joseph. Next week we'll be back to Joseph, and we'll be on Joseph for a number of weeks. The other thing that this does is this whole story creates a parallel between Joseph and Judah, and it pulls out a couple of character traits. So in particular, in this text today, what we're going to find is sexual sin. Next week is the temptation for sexual sin. You're going to see next week Joseph's response to sexual sin. Today, Judah's response, very different. The other thing that this story helps us to see is there's another theme. It's this theme that's been carried throughout the story of Genesis, and it's the theme of deception. Right? It was Abraham who deceived the king as he went into a foreign country and tells his wife to say, "You're my half sister." It's the same kind of deception that you see that Jacob has with his father Isaac as he steals his brother's birthright. And what we see with Jacob is now he has a son, Judah, who is going to be deceived. And so this idea of deception. Another big theme is the idea of the lesser being the one elevated, the one who's born second, elevated above the one who's born first, the one who is not as significant, as important, actually rising above the other. This idea even of antihero. So these are kind of the things that are behind the scenes here as we enter into this reading of Genesis chapter 38. So at that time, Judah leaves his brothers. Perhaps there's conflict. Perhaps he just can't stand living with the deception that they have pulled the wool over their father's eyes because they sold their brother. Perhaps he can't live with himself. It was his idea to pull the brother out of the pit. Perhaps he has this great sense of guilt. Perhaps there's this bickering. We don't know what's going on. But there's something, and the text seems to indicate there's something between Judah and the brothers. And so Judah leaves. He leaves his brothers, and he went down, literally 3,000 feet down. So he's down a mountain southwest from Hebron, going towards the Dead Sea, down to a man of Adullam, down to stay with a man of Adullam, apparently somebody that he knew, and his name is Hira. There, Judah, and the language is interesting in the original. There, Judah met. The original language, the word isn't met, but it is see. There, Judah saw. He saw this woman. He saw a Canaanite woman, the text tells us, the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. And the original doesn't say married, but says took. He saw and he took. He saw a Canaanite woman, and he took the Canaanite woman, and he lay with her. Now, some things to kind of think about with this. So Judah, remember, Judah is the son of Jacob, right? And Jacob gets the name Israel, right? And Jacob is the son of Isaac, and Isaac is the son of Abraham. And it was to Abraham that God appeared and said, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to turn you into a great nation. And then he appears to Isaac and says, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to turn you into a great nation. I'm going to bless the world through you. I'm going to give you this land, right? Says the same things to Abraham. And to Jacob, God appears and he says all the exact same kinds of things. And remember that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob all said to their sons, do not marry a Canaanite woman. You must go back and you must get somebody from our family. Now, there's a whole reason to that. It's because of the behavior and the practices of the Canaanite. Very wicked people. They've been wicked for generations, hundreds of years, and God establishes his people through the nation, or through Abraham, and turns them into his people. Eventually, this whole Joseph story is about getting them out of the Canaanite culture down to another culture, the Egyptian culture. And eventually, he's going to bring the nation back to judge the Canaanite culture many hundred years later. But here we have Judah doing exactly what he's not supposed to do in marrying a Canaanite woman. Now, it seems, because of the way that the language is written, that he sees and he takes. It seems as though what the author is communicating is that Judah's act is one out of just purely driven out of sexual passion and desire. He sees this woman, he wants to sleep with her, he wants her. It's the exact same language that we encountered with Dinah. Remember, Dinah, the sister, right? And the brothers get really mad because Jacob doesn't do anything, because Shechem comes out, he sees Dinah, and he takes her, and he rapes her, right? And the brothers are like, this should not happen. It's that same language. It's the exact same phrase used in the garden. We encountered this in the garden when the snake, the serpent, entered the garden and tempted the man and the woman. And they saw and they took. The way that the writer writes with this language, it leads us to the sense in which this Judah actions is not one out of good character, but out of poor character. So he marries her. He lays with her. She becomes pregnant. She gives birth to a son. The son's named She conceives again, gives birth to another son. His name is Onan. And she gives birth to yet another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. There's a sense in which these three sons are born fairly quickly, probably fairly close in age. That becomes important as we move forward in the story. If they're brothers and say they're 2 years apart, so from the first to the last, to the third here, there's only 4 years that separate them. So the next part of the story is this. Years obviously go by, and again, remember Joseph, he's in Egypt, so years going by. Judah, son grows up. So he goes and he gets him a wife, and her name is Tamar. Her name is Tamar. But Judah's firstborn son, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. We don't know what or why, but his actions were so evil that God just put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, lie with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to produce offspring for your brother. And we need to pause here for a second. This is what is called a levirate marriage. This is a common practice. It's a levirate marriage is practiced even today in several cultures. But what a levirate marriage, so the nation of Israel, this newly budding nation of Israel, is practicing this levirate marriage. It's the same practice practiced by the Hittites, by the Ugarites, by the Assyrians, by others living around. We have like ancient documents that show us that this is the way that the culture behaved. They practice levirate marriage. Now, what's levirate marriage? Levirate marriage is when a brother dies, when the oldest dies, his wife is given to the younger brother. And it's his responsibility to give that woman a son, a child, so that she has an inheritance and so that the family name continues on. This is to be viewed and understood as a good thing, a compassionate practice in light of the culture of the day. It is a way to take care of the woman. So I think I gave this, a little quote here. The purpose was to ensure that a childless widow would have a son who would receive her late husband's inheritance. Now going on to the next verse, but Onan knew that the offspring would not be his, so whenever he lay with his brother's wife, Tamar, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from producing offspring for his brother. And what he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. You got to love Scripture. Look at how graphic that is, right? You're like, that can't be in the Bible. There's no way that can be in the Bible, right? Who put that in there? We can't talk like that. Well, apparently God wants us to understand how people can behave. And he's not afraid to give us these very graphic descriptions and then to declare that this behavior is not appropriate, it's not right. Actually, wicked is what God says. Wicked. Now, apparently what is probably the wickedness here is that Onan is using Tamar, right? He's only using her for his own sexual gratification. He could have refused to marry her. He didn't have to do this. But he chooses to not pass on his seed to her, to not give her an inheritance, to not enable her to be blessed. He makes that very conscious decision, and yet he's willing to sleep with her to satisfy himself sexually. Now, that's worth a pause and a reflection, is it not, in personal application to think about how we, as people living in 21st century, 2025, view sex. And in our culture, sexual gratification is definitely do it whatever you want, however you want, in whatever way you want. It's all about you. Which this text helps us to understand, no, that's not good, that's not appropriate, that's not the right way to fulfill your sexual desires. And go all the way back to the beginning of the series, and we see that sexual desires are to be fulfilled in the context of a marriage between one man and one woman. That's the context. But of course, you can fulfill your sexual desires in lots of ways. You can pay. You can use somebody for those purposes, and that's exactly what happens here. So, moving on in the story, Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar this tragic thing: "Go live as a woman in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up." Why? Well, because has been put to death. Onan's been put to death. So Tamar, I'm not going to give you Shelah, my third-born son, right? Why? For he thought, Judah had this thought, that Tamar's the problem. My sons are dying because of this woman. She must be a bad luck charm, right? So he had this thought, Shelah may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. Judah, the actions here is very self-focused. He's concerned about his son. He's not concerned at all about Tamar. This is this is a casting off of a woman to leave her in the context, in a cultural context, in which she is going to have nothing. He's thinking only of himself. So the story goes on. After a long time, Judah's wife, so again, more time, right? More time. So there's a good bit of time. And still you're left with Joseph, who's in Egypt. So a lot of time has gone by. What's going on with Joseph? We don't know. We're going to find out. But a good amount of time goes by, and Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. And when Judah recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira the Adullamite went with him. Now, when Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on the way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then she sat down at the entrance to the city gate, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that though Shelah had grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. So she's making this conclusion, right? She's like, I've been living as a widow for a number of years. This man whom my father-in-law promised to be given to me, he is not living up to his promise. He's been deceptive, and now he doesn't come through with his word. I'm never going to get out of my situation of being a widow living in my father's house. I will forever be left alone to suffer in this way. And so the other thing that won't happen is there will not be anybody who is in the line of Judah through whom a child will be born. So all these things are going on inside of her. So, verse 13, when Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear a sheep, she takes off her widow's clothes, she covers herself with a veil to disguise herself, and she goes and sits down. So when Judah sees her, what she's doing is she's dressing as a prostitute. Okay, and in this culture, there's two kinds of prostitutes. There's one who's the temple prostitute, and she's the one who you can safely and in a, so to speak, legal way, go and sleep with. It's a higher position of being a prostitute than one who is kind of working behind the scenes. And so she's this temple prostitute. She goes out to the city gate. She presents herself as a prostitute so that when Judah sees her, again, here's that same word that we saw way back in the beginning that began his marital relationship. When he sees her, he thought she was a prostitute, a temple prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, come now, let me sleep with you. And what will you give me to sleep with you? She asked. And so this becomes this business transaction, right? Well, I'll send you a young goat from my flock, he said, and will you give me something as a pledge until you send it? She asked, and he said, what pledge should I give you? And she says, well, your sword, or your seal, and its cord, and the staff in your hand. Essentially, this is like asking for his credit card. Okay, his seal, he's a wealthy man, and this is a way to stamp, this is my stuff and my property. So she's basically saying, like, give me your credit card, I'll hold that on loan, right? So after she left, so he gave them to her, and he slept with her. This is very transactional sex. She becomes pregnant by him. And after she left, she took off her veil, she put on her widow's clothes again. And she goes back to the kind of lifestyle that she had had. Now, meanwhile, Judah, he sent the young goat by his friend the Adullamite in order to get his pledge back from the woman, but he didn't find her. So he asked the men who lived there, where's the shrine prostitute, the temple prostitute, who was beside the road? Well, there hasn't been any temple prostitute here, they said. Oh, so now they're like, wow. So he went back to Judah and said, I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said, there hasn't been any temple prostitute. So Judah says, well, let her keep my credit card, or I'm going to become a laughingstock. Well, that's interesting. So it's okay for Judah to fulfill his sexual desires, right? And to keep that kind of a secret, right? He doesn't want to become a laughing stock. He doesn't want that to be made known amongst the community. So I don't know where this lady went, but she can keep what she's got because I don't want to be exposed in that way, even though he did it. About 3 months later, Judah was told, your daughter-in-law, Tamar, is guilty of prostitution. And as a result, she is now pregnant. So Judah said, well, bring her out and have her burned to death. Well, this is very rash. It's also very harsh. But it is a way to protect the inheritance or a way to protect the family line. Tamar is supposed to stay in the family of Judah. This is the account, remember, the account of Judah. Her offspring are to be in the line of Judah. If she is sleeping with a man outside of the line of Judah, that is bad. To prevent that from happening, we will kill her. That's the thought process here. But know this, not only is she to be killed, but the law also demands that the man who sleeps with her, he's to be killed too. So he judges himself, not even knowing it. So as she's being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. And this was the message. I'm pregnant by the man who owns these. Uh-oh. She added, see if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are. And Judah, of course, recognized them. And this is what he says. She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son, Shelah. And he did not sleep with her again. Now, I give us a little definition in the next slide here about, I guess I don't here. I'll get to it in a second then. So when the time came from her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife, this is important. Just kind of follow what's happening here. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hands, twin boys, right? One of them puts out his hand, so the midwife ties a scarlet thread around it, but then he pulled his hand back in, but because his hand came out first, he's the firstborn, is the implication. But then he draws back his hand, and then his brother comes out, and she said, oh, so this is how you've broken out, and she called him Perez. He's the secondborn. He's not the firstborn. He's the secondborn. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was given the name Zerah. All right, so this is a crazy, crazy story, right? And there's a whole bunch of things that are going on here. There's a lot of disturbing things. There's cultural things. There's stuff that just make us uncomfortable. But quickly, 3 points. The first point is this. By reading the story, you definitely have to conclude that the men in the story are the villains. The men are the villains. The men are the bad guys. This is pretty significant, okay? Because the men are always painted in this culture as the good guys. But the men are the bad guys. The men are the villains. Reading, just a careful, not even a very careful reading, you quickly see that the men are the villain, right? And so it's who is so wicked that God puts him to death. It's Onan, who is so wicked because of his actions of fulfilling his sexual desires in the way he does, is put to death. It's Judah, who is a villain. He leaves his brothers rather than seeking reconciliation. He marries a Canaanite woman, which he should not, is not to be doing. He deceives his daughter-in-law Tamar by saying, I'm going to eventually give you my thirdborn son. He doesn't keep his word, so he's a liar. He buys sex from Tamar. And then he's concerned more about his own reputation than about anything else, definitely more about his own reputation than his own sinful actions even. He doesn't see his actions as being wrong and sinful. And then he's so quick to judge Tamar, condemning her and thereby condemning himself. The men in this story, they are the villains. The men are the villains. The men are the villains, not the women. The men are the villains. This is really important in this culture because the way in which women are constantly treated, which is wrong, Morally wrong. Scripture doesn't always say that. But over and over, we've seen how the women in the story of Genesis are put down, mistreated, used like a piece of property. It's wrong. And that's what Genesis is teaching us, is that the way that men treat women is wrong. As we move into the New Testament, we find Jesus turning culture upside down, because it's Jesus, God in flesh, who invites women to be with him. He shows interest and care and concern for women, ways in which the men of the culture don't. He elevates women to this place of equality, of equalness in terms of humanness. The Apostle Paul says the same thing in Galatians chapter 3. He says, there's neither male nor female, Jew or Greek, right? We're all one in God's eyes. This is very significant to see this in the story. The men are the villains. The woman is the antihero. Okay, so Tamar is not completely righteous, right? Now, Judah says she's more righteous than I am. She's more righteous than me. Here's my definition, right? Not my definition. The definition of righteous. What does it mean when he says she is more righteous than I? Righteous, the word means to be just or righteous. It's to have a just cause or to be in the right. It means to be vindicated. What he's saying is that Tamar is doing the right thing in carrying on the family line and seeking the birth of more children. It is God who said, I'm going to bless you, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I'm going to turn you into a great nation. She is attempting to fulfill, to live out this promise. And even this instruction within the Israelite covenant community. And Judah forsakes that. Judah is not about that. And so he says, she is more righteous than I because she sees that I wasn't going to give my son to her. She's the antihero. Her prostitution, her methods may not be right, but she ends up being the hero of the story. How is it that she ends up being the hero of the story? We'll find that in just a second. But the third main point is that God is the providential, merciful one who elevates the lesser above the greater. God's the hero of the story. Okay, so what we don't see is what is said in the very end. You have to read the rest of your Old Testament and into the New Testament to understand what is taking place with the birth of Perez through Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law. I got to run really quick. All right, so here's what happens. So God is the providential, merciful one, elevating the lesser above the greater. And how do we see that? We see that through, number one, through Tamar, right? Tamar is the lesser one. She's the one who's used by men. But God elevates her. She's the one who's declared to be righteous by Judah, and she's the one who's going to receive an amazing gift, the gift of Perez, but even more. We'll see it in a second. The second way in which we see that God is providentially merciful and elevating the lesser is through the birth of the children. So it is Perez, the second born, who ends up, we'll see it in a second, being incredibly significant. It is Perez, the second born, who is the one who's honored, the one who's blessed, which is a big theme throughout the book of Genesis, right? So it is Isaac, not Ishmael, who's the one that is blessed. It is Jacob, not Esau, who is the one that is blessed, and the covenant continues through. And here it is Perez, who is the one, the second born, who is elevated above. How we see this. So if you keep reading in your Old Testament, you eventually run into a story of Ruth. She's a Moabitess. She marries Naomi. Naomi is her mother-in-law. She marries Naomi's son, who dies. Eventually, Ruth finds a husband in a man named Boaz. And the end of the story of Ruth chapter 4, this is what we read. Then the elders and all those at the gate say this blessing over Boaz. We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house, Ruth, like Rachel and Leah, and together who built up the house of Israel. This is this prayer of blessing upon Ruth, right? May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem through the offspring that the Lord gives you by this young woman, Ruth. May your family be like that of who? Of Perez. Who is Perez's mother? Whom Tamar bore to Judah. And then you follow this whole genealogical tree here, and you get to the end. Ultimately, and what you find is, it is through Tamar that she's the great-great-great-grandmother of the greatest king of the nation of Israel, King David. So the lesser is elevated. It is through this woman who's the antihero, who is mistreated, put down, who God elevates. And it's through her son, the second born, that this promise comes. Worship team, come on up. Third, or another point I should say, within this, God is the providential, merciful one. God is a providential, merciful one. He also is working good out of the destructive actions of people. He works good out of the destructive actions of people. So the men are the villains. The woman's the antihero. God is the providential, merciful one. He works good out of the destruction actions of people. And this has been the theme of Genesis that we've seen, right? People do evil, wicked things. And you look at that and you say, this is evil and wicked. And you should look at it and say that this is evil and wicked. And yet out of the evil and wickedness, God somehow does something good. And so when you read this story, and you read all of the Bible, and you run into, the New Testament, and we are introduced in Matthew chapter 1, this amazing story in which God comes into the world as a person, the person Jesus Christ. And you know what the lineage of Jesus Christ is? This is how the writer of Matthew begins. He says, this is a record of the genealogy. This is the genealogical tree of Jesus Christ. He is the son of David, the son of Abraham. Now, Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of Judah. Remember, it's the account of Jacob, right? Who's the father of Judah and his brothers. All other brothers aren't mentioned. It's Judah who's mentioned. Not Joseph who's mentioned, it's Judah who's mentioned. And Judah is the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother is Tamar. Tamar, the daughter-in-law, the anti-hero, is the one whose name is the name that we speak today. Out of all the people of antiquity, of all the people in the line of Jesus Christ, Tamar's the one who's mentioned. This is quite remarkable. What is it that God is telling us? God is telling us that in spite of all the injustices that come about upon a person, and in spite of all the evil and wickedness that the villain and the anti-hero might do, and you might do as an anti-hero, he redeems. He's at work behind the scenes, redeeming, bringing about good things. I invite you, if you've never received Jesus Christ in your life, to open your life to him. Church, I'm going to invite you to stand. Let's sing this final song together, remembering the promises that lie ahead.
Lord, I confess that I've been a criminal. I've stolen your breath and sang my own song. Lord, I confess that I'm far from innocent. These shackles I
over the ashes, a wide open tomb where there should be a casket. Children are singing and dancing and laughing. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. Roses in bloom, pushed up from the embers. Rivers of tears flow from good times remembered. Families are singing and dancing and laughing. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. Heaven joins in with the glorious sound, and the great cloud of witnesses all gather round. 'Cause the ones that were lost are finally found. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. Scarlet says, how the crimson cross. You nailed my debt to that old rugged cross. An empty slave at the empty grave. Thank God that soul was rolled. Oh, 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 oh. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. Whoa, 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 whoa. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. You're calling us home, Lord. You're calling us home. I see bright crimson robes draped over the ashes, a wide open tomb where there should be a casket. The children are singing and dancing and laughing. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. Roses in bloom, pushed up from the embers. Rivers of tears flow from good times remembered. Families are singing and dancing and laughing. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. Heaven joins in with the glorious sound, and the great cloud of witnesses all gather round. 'Cause the ones that were lost are finally found. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. Scarlet says, crimson cross. You nailed my debt to that old rugged cross. An empty slate at the empty grave. Thank God that soul was rolled. Sing on. Whoa, 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 the Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. The Father is welcoming. This is our homecoming. Oh, we love you, Lord. Jesus, you're calling us home. Lord, we love you so much. We thank you for everything you do, everything you are. It's so overwhelming. And we're leaving this place not as a shell of a person, but filled with your Spirit. And let's continue that momentum. Let's continue that depth, that intimacy with you. It can't just be here. God, it's so easy to fall into playing church. It's so easy to look perfect. so easy to leave our stuff outside of these walls. But God, it's yours. It's all yours. The good, the bad, the ugly. You want it all. So I pray we chase that. We chase you, your presence, like never before. Love you, and we want to love you more every day. Amen. You're dismissed, Oak. Have a good week.